This is LARICY Live, and I'm your host, Matt LARICY. We're giving you unfiltered access to the world of real estate, where we can cover the market trends, news, and honest answers to keep you ahead of the real estate game. LARICY Live is brought to you by Lincoln Title. Lincoln Title is the best and most efficient title company in Chicago and is the best place to close your property. LARICY Live is brought to you by Guaranteed Rate and Ben Cohen. Ben Cohen is the #1 lender in Illinois and can close your loan in as fast as 8 days. So today, we are talking about what to do this fall. We are in the fall market, and a lot of people got a lot of questions. I did a podcast a couple weeks back called The Fall Push. We were hoping for a little bit of a push. As of me shooting this podcast, I haven't seen as much of a push as we expected. So a lot of people are a little confused. They're just asking questions of like, what's my next move? What do I do? So what we did is I put together the questions that my sellers and buyers are asking, and I'm going to give you advice on what I would do if I was you, personally. So the first question is with sellers. Do I reduce the price? A lot of sellers are like, hey, is price going to make a difference? It's all relative. If you're in the outskirts and you're in a hotter market and all of the units are selling, then it probably makes sense to reduce the price. If you're in the heart of the city and you're above $1.5 million and nobody's moving, I don't really know if price is the answer, right? So if you're at 155 and nobody else is sold, no other property above 1.5 has sold in a couple months, is it worth to reduce the price? Probably not. I think the easy answer is let's just keep reducing until it sells, right? I think we can all agree right now that if I price something at $1 today, it sells. The fact is we just have to think about is the reduction going to ultimately help us sell the place? If the answer is yes, then I would do so. If you're getting a ton of showings and you're getting no offers, that's a price issue, okay? If you're getting no showings, none of your competitors are getting showings, nobody's selling, then it's not a price issue, it's a market issue. There's two big differences between price and market. And that's why you have to kind of think about it's all relative. I can't just use one answer for the whole market. And that's going to be for all of these questions, guys. One property is not relative to another property. But I'm saying, generally speaking, you have to look at it. Is it a price or is it a market issue? Again, I got some listings that are just crushing it in showings right now. Nonstop getting showings. And they're not getting offers. That's a price thing. I got a couple of places in the Gold Coast that haven't been in a showing 4 months. Legitimately 4 months. Or above $3 million, no showings. Okay? I don't think by reducing it by $50,000 is really going to make that big of a difference. If I reduce by $500,000, it might. So again, you don't want to just reduce price. Take the property off the market. I still think that we're going to have some sort of push this fall. I still think that September and October are going to be semi-decent, and things are selling, okay? They're not selling as fast as we'd like. The problem is that people lose, they lose faith in what we call patience. There's a let's look at duplex downs for a specific example. Duplex downs in the front part of the year, the first 6 months, they fly off the market. January, February, March, there's just none on the market. And then, we hit the fall market, let's call it mid-August on till November, and there's not as much demand for duplex downs, so they tend to sit a little bit longer. And sellers get frustrated. I get 15 duplex downs on the market, and every single one of them is frustrated. Why isn't mine selling today? It's in the front part of the year, they'll sell in a day, but in the back part of the year, it's not everything's going to sell in a day. We just got to be a little bit of patience. I wouldn't take anything off the market just yet. If I'm on the market today, I think pulling it now is not really going to do anything for me. If this is holiday season, we're going to do a holiday podcast about pulling properties. I think it may be worth it. But I think right this second, I don't think it's the greatest idea to pull your property right now. What about putting it in the pockets? Again, I don't think we need to be completely dramatic about taking it off and putting it in the pockets today. Now, there's certain properties, though, that people want to list. We're not on the market yet. And they're is it worth just going right in the pockets rather than going on the active market? Well, it depends on what I got, right? Do I got a $4 million penthouse in River North and I haven't been on the market yet? I may suggest right now, again, depending on it, just start in the pockets and go on after the first of the year. Do I have a $500,000, 2-bed, 2-bath in the heart of Lincoln Park, I'm going on the market. I'm not going in the pockets. So again, it's relative to what I have. I think it's important to look at how many properties are moving, how much inventory am I competing against in that marketplace, what's the demand then for competing products in my area, and then make a decision of, do I either come off the market or do I go in the pockets? But I wouldn't want to be part of this knee-jerk reaction society where it's just like, hey, it didn't sell in the day, I need my instant gratification, so let's come off the market. I just don't think we're at that point just yet. Do I rent my place out? This is a big one. We're getting a lot of people who throw in the towel once we get to the end of September, beginning of October. They just throw in the towel. They're like, listen, I'm going to rent it out. And people ask me, is it better to rent it out? And I ask people, I say, listen, it's a math problem, right? Ultimately, it comes down to math. How does the math work, right? If you rent it out and you're taking a loss every month after you pay all of your bills, okay? And then maybe next year you can sell it for $15,000 more, but it costs you $8,000 to hold that with the rental. I don't think it's worth the risk to possibly make an extra $8,000 or $9,000, right? Because what if your furnace breaks and there goes, 5 of that, 8, now you're down to 3. What if your tenant moves out early? Now you lost that extra 3, now you're positive, and who knows, you might be negative after it's all said and done. Now, if you're pulling in, $1,000 a month after all your expenses, so you're gonna make 12 G's in the next year to rent, then it may make sense. Or if it's just not sellable, it's not moving, right? There's just zero chance it's gonna move. There's zero chance it's gonna move at the first part of next year. Then maybe you rent it out. The other thing to kind of look at is saying okay, well, if I rent it today, because the market's tough, right? It's October. Well, it's going to be October. Do I put it up or do I rent it out? It's okay, well, if you go from a October to October lease, and right now, October, November, and December are really tough months to rent out your property. So if you go October to October, you're in the same cycle at this time next year, okay? And then for everybody out there that doesn't remember, this is a election year, okay? So that means that next year, October, is going to be the absolute heart of the election, which means the market is going to be absolutely dead. Next year, call it from end of July to the end of the year is going to be a bloodbath for the real estate market due to the election. Every single year during an election cycle, if it's a bloody election, the market is absolutely atrocious. You look at the 16 election, the 20 election, and now this one coming up, it's going to be terrible. So do I rent it now for that? That doesn't seem good. Now, if I rent it out for an 18 to, 20-month lease, so then I go into March or 20 of 25. March or April of 2025. Then it could be worth it again. But we have to see what the numbers look like by holding it for another 18 months, and what's the benefit? What's my cost reward? So if you're thinking about renting it out, you have to say to yourself, okay. And the other thing is I get a lot. I'm not even joking around. I get a lot of people. We're on the market for 5 days, and they're like, "Do we pull it off the market and go on the market for rent?" I'm dude, we've been on the market for 5 days. Let's just relax for a minute, okay? So again, we have to understand that during the fall market, we can't be an instant gratification society. We have to know that things are going to take a little bit more time. It's going to take a little bit more of a grind. We got to use a little bit more grit and sales tactics to get this done, but we got to be also a little bit more patient. How many showings do we expect in the fall? I think, again, it depends on price points and areas. If I'm in the outskirts, under $500,000, I'd expect a couple of showings a week. If I'm in the heart of the city and I got a multi-million-dollar property, I'd expect 1 showing a month. If I'm everything in between, 1 showing every week to 14 days. Showings are going to come in more what I call waves, and that's just going to be kind of how it is. And that's just something you kind of have to understand that's just the market. You can't get spring pricing in the fall. I say this all the time. You can't get spring pricing in the fall. So, the stock market changes, guys, and guess what else changes? So does the real estate market. If I'm looking to buy this fall, will more inventory be coming on? See, now here's the thing, guys. I have some buyers who feel like there's not enough inventory. Now, specifically, those are entry-level buyers at, let's call it $250,000 to $500,000 in the outskirts. That's where inventory has been the lowest, and that's where it's going to be the lowest all year. Now, most likely, not a lot of inventory will be coming on, because at the front part of this podcast, I talked about how a lot of sellers are thinking about pulling the properties off the market or just not going on the market at all. So we will see more inventory come on because we are a big city and there'll always be people coming and going, okay? But we just have to know that doesn't come on as much, as consistent as it does at the front part of the year. In the front part of the year, inventory is nonstop. It's like a revolving door. At the back part of the year, specifically, the last quarter and a half, We're going to see stuff come on, just not as frequent. That's all. Well, big city guys, don't freak out. More inventory will come, just not as often. Will rates drop further? And should I wait till next year because rates will be down? There was an article that came out yesterday that said rates are now expected to be higher next year than this year. This is what the people think. So, I never buy for rates. And let me tell you something. If rates drop next year, it's going to be a feeding frenzy because everybody else has been waiting for these rates to drop. Don't worry about rates. Buy today, worry about refinancing later, okay? I also personally think that rates are going to drop at the end of this year in December and for the first part of next year because it's my conspiracy theory that I think that the people in power are going to try to get the rates as attractive as they can because we are going into an election year and we live in the Game of Thrones world. And if you guys think for 1 minute that they're going to keep these rates this high to try to win an election, I'm not buying it. I don't care what any expert tells me. I don't care what any Fed tells me. I don't care what the monetary status of financial capabilities of how it can't get that low. I don't care. I solely care that next 6 months, starting December, is going to be a political game, and all bets are off at that point. That's a personal theory. I wouldn't say to bet on my theory. I'm just saying that don't worry about the rate. Worry about buying a place that you like, and then deal with the rate later and refinance it. Is it better to wait till next year to buy? This is a big one. A lot of our buyers are saying hey, it's the fall. Do I just wait till January, etc.? You know what? Everybody else is thinking like that too, right? So if everybody else looks left, the people who look right are usually the ones that win, okay? So right now, we have 1/4 of the demand that we have at the front part of the year, okay? So you're dealing with a quarter of the competition you'll be dealing with at the first of the year. Come January, so let's call it January to the end of April, I call it the spring wave, okay, is the hottest time of the year, okay? So if you're selling a property under $1 million, technically speaking, statistically speaking, from January to mid-April is when you kind of have the most demand. So if you're going to think about holding off buying till next year, you're going to be dealing with 4 times as much demand as you're dealing with today. So if you're feeling stressed out about inventory and competition today with a quarter of the demand, add 4 more times that. The best time of the year to buy is always October, November, December, because that's when you have the least amount of demand. So if you're going to do it, this would be the time to do it. But come next year, it's going to be trickier for you, okay? Well, and you know what? That brings me to a point because I know some sellers are going to be like, well, didn't you just pull it off and wait till next year? Listen, it's, again, not a bad idea, like I said earlier. But the other thing to talk about when we talk about the math problem that I didn't mention is the fact that, if the place is vacant, right, and it's just sitting there for 3 months and it costs you $4,000 a month, right, and now you're going to lose, let's call it almost, $12,000, just for sitting on it. Are you going to make $12,000 more next year? That's a big gamble to do. So that's why I say is try it out for a couple more weeks, then pull it come holiday season. Will prices continue to come down? Statistically speaking, prices drop more in the fourth quarter. So I always love it come Q1 is the market takes off like a rocket ship. Everybody's sales goes up. People are asking more money. It's going crazy. And then everybody's like, hey, prices are rising. They're up 10%, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, and then they're like, hey, by the end of the year, we're going to have a 20% increase. I'm like, listen, guys, let's relax. You got a 10% increase first quarter. Remember, we're probably going to have a 5% decrease in the last quarter. So that means we're probably looking at a 5% increase on a best case scenario. And then we still got a second and third quarter to worry about where prices are going to go. So just remember, prices don't necessarily drop overall in a quarter. It's just perception, right? So a perfect way to look at the difference in pricing is that in the front part of the year, we'll list something in March for $400,000. It's worth $400,000. Okay, comes on at $400,000, worth $400,000. It gets bid up to $425,000. Okay, so now it's at $425,000. It was always worth $400,000. One guy just got really excited and bid it to $425,000. But then what happens? The neighbor comes on. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath, run-of-the-mill, simplex, middle unit, okay? The neighbor comes on in October, is like, hey, John sold his place in March for $400,000, so I think my place is worth $450,000. And I'm like, listen, John sold in March. He came on at $400,000. It got bid up to $425,000. It's really only worth $400,000, okay? But they got bid up to $425,000. So by you going to $450,000, we're going to miss the market because it's also October. But the seller doesn't listen, so they go on at $450,000. Then they drop to $435,000. Then they drop to $425,000. Now the consumer's looking, so this is you buyer. You're looking, you're like, hey, prices are coming down. I saw a place drop $25,000. I'm like, yeah, they dropped $25,000, but it was never worth $450,000 in the first place. It was never even worth that. and then it sells for 410. Okay, so now the consumer's like, prices are really dropping, right? That place dropped 40,000 from initial ask, and I saw the neighbor sold at 4.25. So like, I think prices are down big time. And then this is when the dramatic buyers start coming out of the woodworks, which is going to be our next podcast. But this is when you start telling me like, the world's going to end. I'm like, well, no, it sold at 410. It actually still sold 10,000 above market value because it's still only worth 400, guys. One good comp that sells above ask price more than what something's worth does not reset the market time. Now, if everybody in the area sells around that price point, that resets, comps. One place doesn't set a comp for good or bad. But the biggest problem that happens in the fall of why prices seem to be dropping more is that sellers only fixate on the highest price comp that's sold, and it's usually the one that's sold with multiple bids at the hottest time of year. So I always say, don't look at what's sold. When you're listing in October, November, December, don't look at what's sold January, February, March. Look at what's sold October, November, December of the year prior. That's more or less what your comp is. So as a buyer out there, what you need to try to take advantage of is finding the sellers that are actually priced realistic. And when we talk about prices dropping, it's not prices that are dropping. It's just that you're getting more of a realistic price on a place rather than having to overpay. You're going to overpay most times in January, February, March, and a lot of parts of the city. And in the fall, you kind of pay more like market value. Is it better to rent right now? I personally, if you have the monetary ability to buy, I don't ever see a point of renting. Again, I understand that somebody's out there is going to be like, well, like that's a rich person's thing to say. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you have the money and the means to buy, okay, and you have the ability and you're financially capable of doing it, it makes no sense to rent. Right now, rents are at an all-time high. What's the point of renting if you could buy, right? Like why? I don't see any financial argument for it personally, because people will be like, well, what if I lose $50,000 when I sell? That's fine. But guess what? If you rent for the next 2 years, and you spend $50,000 on renting, no matter what, that money's gone. It's 100% gone. It's never coming back. So if you spend money on a mortgage and it costs you $50,000 when you turn around and sell, it's the same thing as if you would have rented. And you got a couple tax write-offs, and you built up your credit, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot more positives than negatives. But if you rent, 1,000% that money's gone. You'll never see that money again, ever. It's gone. And I understand there's cost of living. I understand somebody out there's like, well, I can't afford to buy. Listen, it's not everybody's meant to buy because they can't financially afford it today. But I'm saying if you have the means to buy, always buy instead of rent. I don't understand the point of renting, especially in the fall, because this is when you could get a better price. Can I expect more multiple bids? This is on the flip side of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. I still see properties, even in the fall market, which some people kind of feel a little bit more doom and gloomy. We still are seeing multiple bids. I've had 2 properties last week go multiple bids, and I didn't win on either of them. I can't even believe where they went to because I know my buyers bid like stupid numbers. So here's the thing: is that there are still some properties that will sell. It's specifically in that outskirts, in that under $750 type of price point. If it's move-in ready, it checks all the boxes, you're priced below market value, et cetera, it goes. I've seen a couple properties that were worth one was worth $650 and they priced it at $600. It was 100% worth $650. And we bid $650. And they said we weren't even close. So people take different strategies at this time of year. Underpricing or pricing in market is usually your best strategy in the fall because if you're going to sell, this is the time to do it. Price it right. You don't have time to do price drops because then you're in holiday season. But you can expect to see multiple bids, but nowhere near as many as the springtime. In the springtime, if you're under $1 million and you're in the hotter markets like the outskirts, everything's multiple bids. Every property you walk into, you walk in to a property right now under $1 million and the agent's really the listing agent's touring you around, they're following you around, they're pushing the you could almost smell the desperation on that agent that they need the sale. And you're almost annoyingly mad, okay, get off my back, let me kind of take a look at it. In the springtime, you walk in that same place, you don't even know where the listing agent is. He's on his phone looking at Facebook or Instagram or whatever kids are looking at these days. It's yeah, hey, listen, I don't know how old the roof is. Highest and best is due at 6 today. And you're dude, it's 5:50. They're oh yeah, Yeah, you got 10 minutes. Just, shoot me a text if you want to buy it or not. Like, I don't, listen, I'm going out to dinner too at 6:15, so I'm going to shut my phone down for the rest of the night. And, I'm going to, circle back with my sellers at like noonish tomorrow when I wake up, and then we'll get back to you. That's the difference. That's the spring realtor compared to the fall realtor. Fall realtors, pretty much stepping on the back of your foot. What do they call that? What do they call it when they step on the back of their foot? There's a saying for that. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm saying. They step it on the back of your feet as you're walking, and in the spring, you don't know where the guy is. So, yeah, I mean, I would take advantage of the fall. Like, personally, I own a big portfolio of real estate. All the places I buy in the fall. Overall, what properties are performing the best and worst right now? And I would say that if you're $500,000 or under in the outskirts, that is hands down the best markets for sellers. And the worst market for buyers, but it's nowhere near as good as it was in the front part of the year. Everything else in the outskirts, I would call balanced, okay? Single family homes above 1.5, I'm going to call it a small buyer's market, okay? That's been a hot seller's market all year, okay? If I'm downtown in the heart of the city, okay, like call it like River North, West Loop, South Loop, those type areas, under a $500,000, I'm going to call it a slight edge to buyers, okay? Everything else above $500,000 is we'll call it a huge buyer's market. And if you're above 1.5 in the downtown markets, it's, one of the biggest buyer's market, if not the biggest buyer's market in the history of our city. So, we still have a huge difference of a tale of two cities. Is it better to be a buyer or seller right now? Statistically speaking, the market's going to tip a little bit more in the buyer's favor. At this time of year. That doesn't mean to pull your place off the market as a seller. Let's not be dramatic. That's just how it is. Different times of year. At the front part of the year, it's better to be a seller, Overall, how can we expect the market to perform from now to holiday season? It's going to be a roller coaster ride. It's going to be a hit or miss. It's going to be week by week. I did a Monday email last week where I said it's like on any given Sunday, any team can win in the NFL, right? And on any given week in real estate, turn in the fall, it can seem very busy and it can seem very slow. It's just going to be the way it is. That's all we got for today, guys. If you got any other questions about the fall market, feel free to reach out. Ask to subscribe to my Monday updates. Every Monday, I break down the market like nobody else does. Every single Monday, I can add you to the list so you can stay along with the market. If you ever need anything, shoot us a message. Thanks for listening to LARICY Live.